Bedlam. The name itself became synonymous with chaos, with madness, with horror. For over 300 years, Bedlam was London's most notorious insane asylum. Thousands of people were locked inside, tortured, experimented on, left to die. And the worst part? People paid money to watch them suffer. This is the story of Bedlam, the asylum that became a tourist attraction, the place where madness was entertainment, and where the line between patient and prisoner was non-existent. Chapter 1. The History of Bedlam. The word comes from Bethlem Royal Hospital, an institution founded in 1247 in London. Originally, Bedlam was a priory, a religious institution. It housed monks and provided shelter for the poor. But in the 14th century, it began accepting patients with mental illnesses. Gradually, it became an asylum, an institution dedicated to housing the mentally ill. By the 17th century, Bedlam had become one of the largest and most famous asylums in the world. It housed hundreds of patients. It was overcrowded. It was chaotic. It was brutal. The building. The original Bedlam building was located in Bishopsgate in the City of London. It was a large, imposing structure, designed to house and contain patients. The building had multiple wards, cells for violent patients, rooms for the less violent, dungeons for the most dangerous. The conditions were horrific. The building was overcrowded. The sanitation was non-existent. The smell was overwhelming. The patients. Who were the patients in Bedlam? They were people with mental illnesses, people with developmental disabilities, people with epilepsy, people with syphilis, people with dementia. But they were also people who didn't fit into society, homeless people, criminals, women who had been raped or abused, political prisoners. Bedlam became a dumping ground, a place where society put people it didn't know what to do with. The treatment. The treatment of patients in Bedlam was brutal. Patients were chained to walls. They were beaten. They were subjected to ice-cold baths. They were bled. They were given enemas. The theory at the time was that mental illness could be cured through violent treatment, through shock, through pain. So patients were tortured in the name of medicine, in the name of treatment, in the name of science. The reputation. By the 18th century, Bedlam had become infamous. Its reputation for brutality and chaos had spread throughout England, throughout Europe. The word Bedlam entered the English language. It became synonymous with chaos, with madness, with disorder. People knew about Bedlam, people feared Bedlam, and some people were fascinated by Bedlam. In this video, we're going to explore the history of Bedlam. We're going to examine the conditions. We're going to look at the treatment of patients. We're going to discuss the paranormal activity that's been reported there. And we're going to ask the question, how did a medical institution become a place of such horror? Let's begin. Chapter 2. The conditions, chaos, and cruelty. The conditions in Bedlam were absolutely horrific. Overcrowded, unsanitary, brutal. Overcrowding. Bedlam was designed to house a certain number of patients, but by the 18th century it was severely overcrowded. Patients were crammed into cells, multiple patients in spaces designed for one. There were no beds. Patients slept on straw on the floor. The straw was rarely changed. It was filthy. It was infested with vermin. The smell was overwhelming. Visitors to Bedlam reported that the stench was so strong, it was almost unbearable. Sanitation. There was no sanitation in Bedlam, no toilets, no running water. Patients were forced to urinate and defecate in their cells. The waste accumulated. It mixed with the straw. It created a toxic environment. Disease spread rapidly. Typhus, dysentery, plague. Patients died from disease as much as from their original conditions. Violence. The staff of Bedlam were brutal. They beat patients. They chained them to walls. They subjected them to extreme temperatures. Patients were placed in ice-cold baths for hours. The theory was that the shock would cure their madness. In reality, it just caused suffering. Patients were bled. Leeches were applied to their skin. The theory was that removing blood would balance the humors and cure mental illness. In reality, it just weakened patients and made them more susceptible to disease. Restraints. Patients were restrained with chains, with manacles. with straitjackets. Some patients were chained to walls for years. They couldn't move. They couldn't exercise. They couldn't maintain basic hygiene. The chains left deep wounds, wounds that became infected, wounds that never healed. Food. The food in Bedlam was minimal and of poor quality. Patients were given thin gruel, stale bread, occasionally some meat. Many patients were malnourished. They were weak. They were vulnerable to disease. Medical treatment. The medical treatment in Bedlam was based on the theories of the time. Theories that we now know were completely wrong. Patients were subjected to shock therapy. They were dunked in cold water. They were exposed to loud noises. They were given electric shocks. Patients were subjected to bloodletting. Leeches were applied to their skin. Veins were opened and blood was drained. Patients were subjected to purgatives. They were given substances that caused severe diarrhea. The theory was that purging the body would purge the mind of madness. Patients were subjected to trepanation. Holes were drilled into their skulls. The theory was that this would release the demons causing their madness. All of these treatments were torture. All of them caused suffering. None of them cured mental illness. Mortality rates. The mortality rate in Bedlam was extremely high. Patients died from disease. Patients died from starvation. Patients died from violence. Patients died from medical treatment. It's estimated that up to 50% of patients died within the first year of admission. Patient accounts. We have accounts from patients who survived Bedlam. Their descriptions are harrowing. One patient described being chained to a wall for months. Another described being subjected to repeated ice-cold baths. Another described watching fellow patients die from disease and violence. These accounts give us a glimpse into the horror of Bedlam, the suffering, the despair, the inhumanity. Chapter 3. Bedlam as Entertainment. The Dark Tourism. One of the most disturbing aspects of Bedlam was that it became a tourist attraction. People paid money to visit, to observe the patients, to watch them suffer. The viewing galleries. Bedlam had viewing galleries, areas where visitors could observe the patients, like they were animals in a zoo. Visitors would pay an admission fee. They would walk through the galleries. They would observe the patients in their cells. They would watch them suffer. The patients were displayed like curiosities, like freaks, like entertainment. The admission fees. Bedlam charged admission fees to visitors. The fees were substantial. Only wealthy people could afford to visit, but many people paid. They came to see the madness. They came to be entertained by human suffering. The admission fees became a source of income for Bedlam. The institution actually benefited financially from the exploitation of its patients. The visitors. Who visited Bedlam? Wealthy people, nobles, clergy, intellectuals, people from all walks of life. They came for entertainment. They came out of curiosity. They came to feel superior to the patients. Some visitors brought their children. They wanted to show their children what madness looked like. They wanted to teach them a lesson about the dangers of mental illness. The experience. What was the experience of visiting Bedlam like? Historical accounts describe it as a chaotic, disturbing experience. Visitors would walk through the galleries. They would see patients in various states of distress. Some patients were violent. Some were catatonic. Some were screaming. Visitors would mock the patients. They would laugh at them. They would throw things at them. The patients were not treated as human beings. They were treated as entertainment, as objects of ridicule. Social commentary. The most famous artistic commentary on Bedlam was William Hogarth's series of engravings titled A Rake's Progress. The final plate depicts a scene in Bedlam. In the engraving, we see wealthy visitors observing patients. The patients are depicted as objects of entertainment. The visitors are depicted as callous and indifferent. Hogarth's work was a critique of the society that allowed such exploitation, a critique of the people who found entertainment in human suffering. The ethics. The use of Bedlam as a tourist attraction raises serious ethical questions. Is it ethical to display people with mental illnesses for entertainment? Is it ethical to profit from human suffering? By modern standards, the answer is clearly no. But in the 18th century, these questions were not asked. The exploitation was accepted. It was normalized. The legacy. The legacy of Bedlam as a tourist attraction is disturbing. It shows how society can dehumanize people with mental illnesses, how society can turn suffering into entertainment. This legacy continues today. We see it in reality television. We see it in social media. We see it in the way society treats people with mental illnesses. Bedlam was an extreme example, but it's an example that shows us where society can go if we're not careful, if we don't treat people with mental illnesses with dignity and respect. Chapter 4: Paranormal Activity in Modern Bedlam. Bedlam closed as an asylum in 1930, but the building remained, and over the years, people have reported paranormal activity. The haunting. Visitors to the Bedlam Museum have reported strange experiences. They've reported seeing ghostly apparitions. They've reported hearing disembodied voices. They've reported feeling unexplained presences. Are these experiences real? Are they genuine paranormal phenomena? Or are they products of imagination? Products of the power of suggestion? We don't know, but the reports persist. Paranormal investigations. Paranormal investigation teams have conducted investigations in the Bedlam Museum. They've used thermal imaging cameras. They've recorded EVP, electronic voice phenomena. They've documented unexplained phenomena. What have they found? They've found thermal anomalies. They've recorded unexplained voices. They've documented strange electromagnetic readings, but they haven't found definitive proof that the building is haunted. They haven't found definitive proof that the spirits of patients remain. Visitor experiences. Visitors to the Bedlam Museum have reported disturbing experiences. Some visitors have reported feeling overwhelming sadness. Some have reported feeling anger. Some have reported feeling fear. Some visitors have reported seeing shadows. Some have reported hearing footsteps. Some have reported feeling touched by invisible hands. Are these experiences paranormal, or are they psychological? Are they products of the emotional weight of the building's history? It's hard to say, but the experiences are reported, and they're consistent. The building's history. The building that housed Bedlam has a long and disturbing history. Hundreds of thousands of people suffered there. Thousands of people died there. The suffering was intense, the trauma was deep, the pain was overwhelming. Is it possible that this suffering has left an imprint on the building? Is it possible that the spirits of the dead remain? From a scientific perspective, there's no evidence for this. But from a spiritual or paranormal perspective, it's a compelling theory. The Bedlam Museum today. Today, Bedlam is a museum. It's located in Southwark, in South London. It's open to the public. The museum documents the history of Bedlam. It displays artifacts from the asylum. It tells the stories of patients. It's a sobering place. A place that reminds us of the horrors of the past. A place that reminds us of the importance of treating people with mental illnesses with dignity and respect. The legacy of Bedlam. The legacy of Bedlam is complex. On one hand, it's a reminder of the horrors of the past. On the other hand, it's a catalyst for change. Bedlam's reputation for brutality helped drive reform in mental health treatment. It helped people understand that the treatment of mental illness needed to change. But the legacy is also a warning about what can happen when society dehumanizes people. A warning about what can happen when we treat human suffering as entertainment. Modern mental health. How far have we come since Bedlam? Modern mental health treatment is vastly different. We have medications, we have therapy, we have support systems. But mental health stigma still exists. People with mental illnesses are still marginalized. They're still discriminated against. They're still treated as less than human. In some ways, we've moved beyond Bedlam. In other ways, we're still struggling with the same issues. The lessons of Bedlam. Bedlam was a place of horror, a place where people with mental illnesses were tortured, exploited, displayed for entertainment. It was a dark chapter in London's history, a dark chapter in the history of medicine, a dark chapter in the history of human civilization. But Bedlam is also a lesson about the importance of treating people with mental illnesses with dignity and respect, a lesson about the dangers of dehumanization, a lesson about the importance of reform. The lessons. What can we learn from Bedlam? First, we can learn that mental illness is not something to be feared or mocked. It's a medical condition. It deserves treatment and compassion. Second, we can learn that the treatment of mental illness must be based on science and evidence, not on superstition, not on cruelty, not on entertainment. Third, we can learn that society has a responsibility to care for its most vulnerable members, to treat them with dignity, to provide them with proper care. Fourth, we can learn that reform is possible, that systems can change, that progress can be made. The modern challenge today, we face new challenges in mental health. We have better treatments, we have better understanding, but we still have stigma, we still have discrimination. People with mental illnesses are still marginalized. They're still struggling to access care. They're still treated as less than human in many cases. Bedlam is a reminder that we need to do better, that we need to continue to reform, that we need to continue to fight stigma. The future. What is the future of mental health treatment? If we learn from the lessons of Bedlam, the future should be one of compassion, of evidence-based treatment, of dignity and respect. But achieving this future requires effort. It requires commitment. It requires a fundamental shift in how society views mental illness. If you enjoyed this investigation, please subscribe to the channel. We explore history, paranormal phenomena, and social issues regularly. But before you go, I want to ask you a question. What do you think about the history of Bedlam? Do you think we've learned from the past, or do you think we're still making the same mistakes? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single comment, and I'd love to hear your perspective. Thank you for watching. And remember, mental illness is not something to be feared or mocked. It's a condition that deserves compassion and proper treatment. See you in the next investigation.